Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the break. It's nice to see you all. My name is Jonah Kuhl. I'm a science program officer at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and lead our single cell efforts, and really pleased to have the opportunity to chair this session on global networks and outreach within the Human Cell Atlas. So a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So again, just to remind all of the speakers to please speak slowly and clearly. We will have interpreters, and also want to make sure that everyone can follow along with what I think will be a really stimulating and exciting series of talks. And then also to all of you that are listening, please ask questions. I think these talks are going to be particularly relevant and exciting, and we'll have a lot of lessons and learnings for all of you. And so it's a great opportunity to engage with a really remarkable panel of experts. As you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and do so in whatever language you feel most comfortable asking them. And so there are translators that will help not only with the talks, but also with the questions. So again, a great opportunity to reach out. With that, I think we will jump straight into the talks. And the first speaker is Bartha Knoppers. Bartha is an international expert in bioethics and has had a remarkable career, in particular focusing on genomics. She's currently a full professor at McGill University and also the director of the Center of Genomics and Policy. Within the HCA, Bartha is the co-chair of the Ethics Working Group and is really working to develop a really robust toolkit for the community. So with that, thank you very much, Bartha, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jonah, and hello, everyone. I'm really excited and pleased to be here on behalf of the Ethics Working Group. When I heard that there were 2,000 members, 74 countries, and when I saw that the talks, it was quite exciting and so indicative of the collaborative nature of this enterprise. And I want to thank Jay Shin for actually, as part of the collaboration, for allowing me to speak first, because I have to rush off somewhere. So this is the presentation on both global bioethics a little bit, and mainly about the Ethics Working Group. I have two co-chairs, Rodrigo from Spain and Barbara Wold from the United States. Next slide, please. The membership, as you can see, we don't have cells and livers and everything moving around. Bioethics and law and policy requires international membership of experienced policy wonks, if I can call them that, who are not only aware, cognizant of their own countries' bioethics laws and so on, but have an interest in how to take those regulations, those guidelines, those laws, and make sure that they can be interpreted in a way to facilitate international collaboration and exchange to build the Human Cell Atlas. I'm pleased to announce that we have on the line in the meeting today, Fabiana Arzuaga from Argentina. She is an expert in intellectual property and is also at the Ministry of Science in Science, Technology, and Productive Innovation in Argentina. And Fabiana has agreed to be our liaison with the Ethics Working Group. And we'd like to, for every regional entity that comes out of the Human Cell Atlas Consortium, to have such liaisons to keep sort of a telephone line between the Ethics Working Group and the different regions of the world to tell us about their concerns and their priorities. So if you're listening and you'd like to be part of this, and you're in the Latin American network, you can contact Fabiana, and she'll be directly our liaison person. Next slide. So a little bit of international background. Everybody always says there's no law, there's a vacuum. Just an illustration, already in 1997, you can see under the Oviedo Convention, as it's known, that there was a legal instrument about the application of biology and medicine with respect to research, and clinical research included, involving human beings. And we also succeeded in 2005, and as I say succeeded because these things are not easy to do to get countries to come to consensus on a universal declaration on bioethics and human rights. Next slide. More specifically to what inspires a lot of the members of the ethics working group and my center in particular is the right to science, how to take this human right, which is sort of dormant and not known, and realize it through different actions, through different guidance, through different frameworks. The first one that explicitly says this human right can be realized through data sharing is from the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. This was picked up by UNESCO in 2017, where they again talked about the human right to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. And again, in that same year at the OECD, in its recommendation on health data governance, it actually encouraged that international collaboration and sharing of scientific knowledge as a common public good. So these are interesting concepts to keep in mind when we think about how to be successful in realizing this atlas. Next slide. On a more practical level, what we've started doing at the ethics working group is to create a toolkit. I think Jonah mentioned this, and it's incremental. It's built as the sort of priorities are set by the Human Cell Atlas. And one of the first aspects, this is the opening page, is one on tips for submission to research ethics boards, for instance. Next slide. But a better understanding of the toolkit comes from where you see our working group helping in ethics governance and ethics committees, which scientists have to face. Can we build the consent tools? Can we provide some guidance on how to prospectively think about data sharing and prospectively imagine what kind of access and use tools and transfer of data or samples that you might need in the future? We also realize that most of you are probably sitting on legacy samples. These are already collected tissues and data that might not meet these forward-looking statements, such as you should mention international data sharing, you should mention collaboration between countries, and so on. And the consent tools, however, is where we began. We heard at the beginning of the meeting about the principles guiding the HCA, and how do you translate those principles and values into the consent tools? Now, we know that every country, every ethics committee has their own way, their own language, but there are some core elements. Then the guidance on access and use, and some other tools, which I'll show you. Next slide. So the ethics toolkit, we have a list here of what's being built, and most of it that you see here is already ready. And I'm going to highlight today some of the currently available tools. Next slide. So for the tips to research ethics committees, we built sort of an FAQ, a frequently asked questions, so that when you submit your protocols, you include these elements, and we provide the clauses and so on, or explanations that you can use. And of course, you can customize them to your project and also to your local norms and regulatory requirements. But this is sort of step number one. Before you even get your funding, you probably have to go through this initial submission. Next slide. These core consent elements are currently online. You can see them. So as you're building future protocols, what are some of the elements you need to mention? International sharing, maybe one day there'll be commercial use. For now, we heard that we're moving to managed access, but for now, open access. There'll be open access with security and protections, of course, cloud servers, withdrawal, and the potential perhaps one day for re-identification. So next slide. Some of these main elements, which is a handy little kit, are then transformed into sort of templates, which you can adjust, customize, and add, subtract, and so on, according to your own protocol and according to what your research ethics committee would require. And we've been making these templates not only for healthy adults, but for deceased donors, for leftover clinical, what I mentioned earlier, the legacy samples, fetal embryonic, and so on. So wherever you can, dig in, get it out, use it, what you need, what you want. And if, next slide, if you have particular areas that we haven't touched yet, and there are quite a few of them, but the next one coming up, for instance, we saw a presentation about cancer, childhood cancer. We will next be addressing special needs clauses, approaches to pediatric participants, which have additional concerns. Next slide. So for data and sample sharing, kind of language, hopefully not too legal. The worst thing you could do is go into all those legal nuances, which often are not understandable and might not even be pertinent in your particular country. But at a high level, what should you include in a MTA or DTA in order to make sure that at the end, when you're successful in your project, you have brought everyone together in an interoperable and harmonized approach. Next slide. Now we heard on the platform that's being built that for the moment it's open access, and I showed you some of the elements that you need in a consent form for open access. But in the human area, most of the tissues to be able to transfer them, use them, share them, and so on, will need a not only a consent that mentions what the HCA is about, but also have a data access committee or a managed access, controlled access process. And this is being prepared so that we can include in this sort of different sphere data, nevertheless, but that has been vetted by a controlled access process. Next slide. Now, at the beginning, to sort of get a flavor, we went through 7 countries. What are the legal and ethical norms already exist? Because not everything is international and UNESCO and Global Alliance. Countries have specific requirements. So we looked at 7 countries and provided something called issues with tissues. And if you're listening and you say, oh, I know what's happening in my country, I'd like to contribute, please send us your local, i.e. national norms, ethics guidance, and that's or requirements in your country. Next slide. Now, this has been up since December, and we have been receiving queries. It's not a law firm, though. It's actually an ethics help desk where you can say, what is the current approach for such and such an issue, or what do I need to do, or I think I know everything that I'm supposed to know about using such kinds of tissues, but I might have missed the latest guidance. And you can ask us, and it also helps us to continually put our ethics toolkit up to date. So that is very important. And what you think is your worry is probably the worry of a lot of other of your colleagues as well. Next slide. So in conclusion, and next steps, we are currently discussing at the whole level, at the top level of HCA, what to do about making it a legal entity to allow for greater transfer because of the European General Data Protection Regulation. We heard earlier this morning about equity, diversity, and inclusion and some of the efforts of the HCA on that very important matter. And so we heard about training. I think I saw that we're moving to different countries for training and outreach. And next slide. I'd like to conclude by thanking especially Emily Kirby, who's the coordinator, who should probably be the first person that you will hear from, and Alex Bernier in our team, the whole ethics working group, my co-chairs, and in particular the funders for realizing how important having a policy infrastructure is to such an international and very exciting endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bartha. Wonderful talk and overview of quite a few resources. So a quick question is, as groups become more engaged or interested in participating and contributing to the Human Cell Atlas, it looks like there's a pretty robust framework as well as a help desk and ways to engage. How early would you encourage people to get in touch with you, or are there specific questions that you anticipate maybe being most helpful for them as they begin to consider or even engage with the Human Cell Atlas?
Thank you, Jonah, for that question. Yes, go to the toolkit and say, this this doesn't help me at all. I need X, Y, Z, as we say in Canada, or say ask a specific question for a specific tissue because there's distinctions made under law and ethics between different tissues. Or send us something and say, what do you think about this? Am I on the right route in terms of what I think I need in terms of an ethics framework for my project? We're really there, one, to build for the whole community what the community needs, what HCA needs, but also to help individual researchers, and then putting that back into the toolkit so others can also, they might have the same question as you do.
Great. And then maybe one additional question that came in from viewer is about re-identification. So acknowledging that it is possible to identify someone by DNA sequence, the possibilities in the future of identifying individuals by single cell data. And maybe just if it's possible to speak to the sort of work and considerations that the ethics working group is putting in place and starting to consider to help clarify and provide guidance for the community on topics like this.
Sure. It was mentioned in the intro that I've been working in genomics for about for 40 years, I guess. This is the perennial, what if one day someone, somewhere, somehow manages to do something that allows for re-identification? I think even in an open access database, which is what we're building right now in the HCA, you can't say you will never be re-identified. I think you can say we will put the best scientific minds, the best IT minds, the best ethics legal minds together to do using the top security that we have at a given point in time. But at the same, and so we will have an open access, which is what we want, but we cannot guarantee that you might ever be re-identified, particularly because of social media, people putting their own cells in different ancestry banks or different other endeavors and the Open Genome Project and so on and so on. It is a threat, but I don't think hypotheticals make good policy. You make good policy to achieve your scientific goals with the best tools. You don't do it in reaction to a hypothetical possibility.
Thank you, Bartha. There was an additional comment thanking you for the presentation. I will echo that sentiment. I know you've got a tight schedule, so thank you again for joining us and sharing the work.
Thanks, everyone.